Hello and welcome to Docday. My name is Bastian Haug and I am the founder of DDoc. DDoc is a community of an international community of diabetes patient advocates. It's a community of people living with diabetes around the world. It's people with diabetes who are active in patient advocacy, who care about peer support, or who do patient or user-driven research and a lot more. Docday, the event we're hosting now, is our platform. It's our platform for the patient voice. It's where we regularly invite these diabetes advocates to talk about what really matters to them, what they consider relevant. And we try to give the word to them so they can stand on this platform, Docday, and talk about these issues. They talk about what they care about, they talk about what is relevant, and we invite them to share their lived experience and to say what they want to raise awareness for. We've been doing this since 2015, 16, 17. This is our 15th Docday, and we have been switching to running these Docdays alongside some of the major diabetes conferences. And EASD, which is taking place this week, is the largest diabetes conference in the world. At DDoc here, we believe in the value that these diabetes advocates bring to scientific conferences, such as ATTD, EASD, ISPAD, and many more. And we believe it is important to have the patient voice represented, to have it represented and heard loud and clear. Nothing about us without us is the corresponding hashtag. In order to achieve that, we have created the DDoc Voices Scholarship Program. Our DDoc Voices are currently attending EASD. They are attending its scientific sessions. They're going to the poster exhibitions, the industry symposia. And here's what they do. They listen, they learn, and then they translate. They translate into different languages, of course, but they also translate into lay language. They translate and filter and basically always ask, how is this relevant? How is this relevant to me? How is this relevant to other people living with diabetes? And then they share that. They share that through their social media channels, through Insta, Facebook, maybe even TikTok, I don't know. They share it in their peer support work. They share it in their local communities. We call that paying it forward. They pay forward what they learn, and this is also why we invite them, why we give them this scholarship. I would really like to thank them for doing the amazing work they do. You will see hundreds and thousands of Twitter impressions, tweets, Insta posts out there this week specifically. I would also like to thank our partners that support this program, the DDoc Voices Scholarship Program. These partners for this year are Lilly Diabetes Care, Ascensia, Diabeloop, Novo Nordisk, Tandem Diabetes Care, Dexcom, Medtronic, and the Diabetes Center in Bern. I'd like to thank all of you for empowering the patient voice, for enabling us to run this DDoc Voices Scholarship Program, and thereby making it possible to bring diabetes advocates to, right now, EASD, to this conference. Of course, this year, this is only happening virtual. All conferences have been virtual for almost 2 years now. But next year, we hope we will be able to go back to live participation. We hope that our partners' contributions will then be able to fund travel and accommodation for patient advocates to attend a conference like this. Another thank you before we start goes to EASD itself for inviting us, for allowing us to be here, and to Chantal Mathieu. Professor Chantal Mathieu, the Vice President of EASD, has been extremely supportive in making this happen. She's always been behind this idea of the DDoc Voices program. She's always been a big supporter of the patient voice being heard. And some of you may know that it hasn't always been the case. A couple of years ago, when we first started Docday at EASD, we weren't even allowed into the premises. And now we're here on invitation of EASD and Chantal Mathieu. So thank you very much. Chantal was present at our DDoc Voices networking event. That's an internal event we did last week. We always do this just in front of a conference like this so that the voices get to know each other, they get to know our partners, they get to talk with some of the researchers. She was there to personally greet the DDoc Voices. She cannot be here live right now because this is the EASD. She's the vice president. She's chairing multiple sessions throughout this week. But we have recorded her words of welcome to all of you, to our audience Here's Chantal Mathieu, Vice President of EASD.
Dear friends, dear DDoC supporters, dear members of EASD, dear attendees at EASD, welcome to this joint EASD Docday. DDoC being a platform for diabetes advocates to stand on is for us a natural partner at EASD to really spread the word, speak in harmony about diabetes to people living with diabetes, but also researchers, clinicians, etc., on topics that are of importance to all parties involved in our quests to fight diabetes and to better treat people with diabetes. Today, you are having a fantastic program with topics that are common to EASD and the whole community of people living with diabetes, like this festive centennial of the 100th anniversary of insulin. Insulin, this central drug for people with type 1 diabetes, but also for people with type 2 diabetes and other forms of diabetes. And that is also a topic of your Docday today. You will be talking about different forms of diabetes, but also about topics that are not so typical for EASD, namely stigma about diabetes. And especially, I'm extremely happy that there will be a worldwide attendance to our Docday today. Indeed, you have people from all 5 continents attending this event. So it will be fun, it will be interesting, and what is more important, it will matter. It will matter to people living with diabetes and to all those involved in research and in the treatment of people living with diabetes. So have a fantastic EASD Docday and join us again next year. Bye.
Mathieu, Vice President of EASD. Again, thank you, EASD. Thank you, Chantal, for having us here. And yes, we will certainly come back next year as well. I now look forward with all of you to an exciting hour and a half with our DDoC Voices and with other advocates that we have been inviting, indeed, from around the world. We have speakers from around the world. We have an audience from around the world. And before I forget, I would also like to invite you already now for tomorrow's Doc Night. Because Doc Night is an event where we all come together and where it will be a lot more interactive. This is more broadcasting to you, our international audience. Tomorrow, Doc Night is a virtual hangout where you can meet and chat and even have a virtual glass of beer or wine with all the people you will be seeing here and many, many other advocates, but also visitors of EASD, doctors, nurses, researchers, industry. Everybody will be coming together at Doc Night. It's a great, fun experience. We have multiple rooms. It's not a standard Zoom conference. It is fun. We have a pool, we have music, we have drinks, we have a bar. Come and join us tomorrow night for Doc Night. You can find the login details. You have to register on our website, ddoc.org/docnight. It'll be fun, trust me. Just wanted to make sure I don't forget this at the very end. Now, before we start, Docday itself doesn't have any sponsors, but as I said in the beginning, we have the DDoC Voices program, and for the DDoC Voices program, we have partners that enable our diabetes advocates to attend these conferences like EASD. And I would like to now invite Antonella Ettore from Lilly Diabetes Care to this virtual stage. Lilly is supporting the DDoC Voices program as our partner and has been actively reaching out to the diabetes online community, especially this year. Antonella, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for representing Lilly. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Bastian, for the kind introduction. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. It's my great pleasure today and honor having the opportunity to speak with you, connected from all over the world. And again, I am Antonella Ettore from Lilly Diabetes, and today I'm speaking from the south of Italy, where my family currently lives. But before going into the detail of my speech, I just want to say that in Lilly, we truly believe that that people with diabetes and diabetes online community play a significant role in diabetes environment. And your voice should be better and more heard in any decision-making process, anytime and everywhere, to achieve more impactful results. And that's why also a couple of years ago, together with Bastian, led by Bastian, we embarked on a journey, or better, on a marathon, as Bastian says, to have a better understanding of diabetes online community space. And that's why today I have this great honor and pleasure to speak with this international audience. What I want to tell you today, guys, it's more about the centennial insulin anniversary and the Lilly Leonard Award. So the upcoming 3 years period from 2021 to 2023 is going to represent a great momentum for the diabetes community to commemorate the great improvement in care from for people with diabetes since insulin first was made available. And today we are reminded and inspired by the life of Leonard Thompson, the guy that you can see here from the slides, that was treated with insulin in 1922 when he was just 14 years old. Over the past 100 years, insulin innovation has evolved, but in Lilly, we remain committed to transform diabetes care through innovative medicines by investing time and resources for finding better solutions for people living with diabetes around the world. But despite great strides, still 460 million people are living with diabetes around the world, 80% of them in low and middle income countries. And according to the latest Atlas and IDF global data, still 1 out of 2 don't have access to insulin. 2 out of 3 don't have access to diabetes supplies like test strips, glucometers, and far too many are struggling with healthcare expertise. And that's also why it's easy to understand that diabetes, access to diabetes care involves much more component than just only access to insulin. And for this reason, and the next slide, please, Lilly Diabetes and Life for a Child, a non-profit organization, have been working together for more than a decade to expand access to diabetes care. And recently, in January 2021, we have announced a major expansion of our partnership together with other stakeholders from diabetes community to serve more patients, from 23,000 to 150,000 people living with diabetes in 65 countries over the next 10 years. So a 5-fold increase compared to the current number. And here I just want to pause to thank you, some of you in the diabetes community, for having guided our thinking in this area. And I just want to thank you, Bastian, for this, since together as a united community, we can achieve more and further goals. But the centennial insulin anniversary is also a great opportunity to bring up the level of attention that diabetes and people with diabetes deserve everywhere. That's why, as Lilly Diabetes, we launched the Lilly Leonard Award. Next slide, please. That will reward for the upcoming 3 years, 21, 22, and 23, diverse champions, which are dedicated to advancing diabetes management. Now, the award is open to eligible participants from the 5 categories that you can see here in this slide, and the 5 winners will be chosen and selected by a committee of well-recognized judges from the diabetes community. $20,000 for each winner, for a total of 100,000 will be devoted to Life for a Child to ultimately expand the access to diabetes care for youth and children living with diabetes in low and middle income countries. So what I need from you guys, stay tuned around World Diabetes Day and don't miss Docday at World Diabetes Day, since together with Bastian, we are going to announce and present you the winners from Lily Leonard Award from year one. In the next slide, you can find my contact together with a picture of the sea where I'm living. So do not hesitate to reach me out anytime you need. And now back to you, Bastian, to address any question, if any. Otherwise, thank you very much for the attention and for what you are doing in the diabetes community.
Thank you, Antonella. Thank you for presenting this award. Thank you for talking about Life for a Child and the contributions you're doing to Life for a Child. It's become very popular in the Diabetes Online community, also through the Spare a Rose campaign that has been a community-driven effort for many, many years. And it's great to see that Lily has been such a great supporter of this program for over a decade now and is now scaling up that support. But quickly talking about that Leonard Award, just out of curiosity, can I ask you how many people were nominated or applied and what kind of people will we be seeing there? Are you allowed to share that, or?
Yes, of course I can.
I mean, not names, but...
No, of course. A lot of people have been nominated. So for the first year, we had around 100 nominations. And as I was telling you before, there are 5 different categories. So the nomination comes from teen and young adult, advocate and advocacy professional, endocrinologist and primary care physicians, diabetes educator and nurses, and researcher. Everyone in the community can nominate 1, 2, 3, whatever, from these 5 different categories. And then there will be a dedicated panel of well-recognized judges who will be deciding the five winners. So not easy work.
And we look forward to seeing the 5 happy faces from this year's award around November, and maybe hearing more about who they are at our very own Docday on World Diabetes Day. It's a Docday that we're hosting together with IDF Europe, and we will also be talking there about this annual topic in the centennial about access to care, access to diabetes care, access to insulin, etc. So we look forward to that event on 14th of November and to seeing the winners of the Leonard Award. And I think by then you will also announce how this award will proceed over the next 2 years.
Exactly. Stay tuned.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Antonella. Thank you for Lily's support to the DDoC Voices program once again, together with all the other partners that are doing so. Now, let's get this going. Our first speaker, just because it is very, very early in the United States right now, is Felissa DeRose, and we're heading straight over to her because she just got up. It's 6:30, I think, Felissa, and you have to really wake up your little child and bring her to school. And that's why you are the first speaker today. Felissa DeRose from the United States. On blackdiabeticinfo.com, you can find more about her, and you'll be speaking about misdiagnosis and LADA and unity in the diabetes community. Felissa, take it away.
All right. Good morning, everyone. It's morning for me. It might be evening for you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you very much, Bastian, for the invitation. Of course, I woke up early just for DDoC Day. Everyone, my name is Felissa DeRose, and like Bastian said, I am from the U.S. I'm actually down here from the Miami area in South Florida. I've lived in 3 countries, and I've managed diabetes in 3 different places, and I enjoy traveling. I was diagnosed with diabetes 10 years ago, at the time when I thought my life was perfect. Everything was going great. I had just finished my PhD in English literature, a goal of mine that I had had since I was 18, and I was starting my first job as a professor. To a degree, I thought that I was living my life like it's golden and nothing could stop me. And then I got sick. I ended up in the hospital with DKA, and it was there that I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. At the time, I had no idea that misdiagnosis was a thing, that misdiagnosis could be an issue. And so I lived with that diagnosis for 8 long years. I managed my diabetes with insulin. I managed my diabetes with orals. I even managed my diabetes for almost 3 years with just diet and exercise. It never occurred to me that I was misdiagnosed. Through this diagnosis, I learned 3 important things. And that's what I want to share with you today. One is that misdiagnosis in our community needs more attention. After I had lived 8 years with the type 2 diagnosis, I experienced DKA again. Because I knew what those symptoms were like: extreme thirst, frequent urination, quick weight loss, even though in the beginning I thought it was a good thing. But there comes a point when you're losing 2 pounds a day that you know something is wrong. By this time, I had the equipment to monitor my blood sugar, and I was well aware that I, for whatever reason, would not go below about 250. I didn't know to ask for type 1 antibodies to double check to confirm my diagnosis. And it took over a year asking 2 different endocrinologists for tests for me to get it. So in our community, misdiagnosis needs more attention. The second thing is we need to have more conversation across types. When I was diagnosed with type 2 and I discovered the DLC, I was so excited because it's the first person in my immediate family who's diagnosed with diabetes. I felt so alone. But oftentimes when I would go online, the DLC seemed rather uninviting for people who were diagnosed with type 2. And so we need to be more open and to have those conversations and to be more inviting and to make sure our space is a safe space, no matter the type of people with diabetes. The third thing is that my latter story matters. Being diagnosed with latent autoimmune diabetes in adults 2 years ago, I experienced a change. It was emotional. It was physically taxing. It was confusing. I was angry. How could this happen to me? Like I said, I had lived in 3 different countries. I've gotten care, and yet here I am living with type 1 diabetes, but misdiagnosed. And so as we think about our diabetes types, remember all types. There are things that unify us, and we're all in this fight together. When I started my blog, Diagnosed Not Defeated, from my hospital bed, that became the motto in which I lived by. So even though I have been misdiagnosed, and since then I've discovered that it's not that uncommon and it needs to change, I'm here to say that I've been diagnosed twice, but I'm still not defeated. That's my awareness campaign. Thank you so much for your time, Bastian.
Great story, but also for that call for unity. Diagnosed, twice diagnosed, not defeated. Here you are smiling at us. I remember meeting you just after you became aware of that misdiagnosis, and also in the struggles of, am I staying where I am? Am I moving back to the United States? And all the questions that came up. I remember how shocked you were about all this and the conversations we had at the time. And it's great to see you here, great to see you smiling at us. And thank you very much for calling out for this unity, especially towards the other types, the not type 1 types, because it is something that we ourselves here at DDoc are to some degree guilty of, that we've been very type 1 focused. I myself am type 1, of course. Many in the community are type 1, but we need to be more open to the many other types, of course, especially also the type 2s, but also the LADAs and MODIs. And today, this Doc Day, and it's not something we plan for actively, but this Doc Day today will be a lot about stigma and about other types of diabetes. So thank you for opening it so emotionally, and we'll get to some of these topics. And now you please run off, wake up your little daughter, bring her to school, and I hope to see you at a Doc Day in the future again.
Okay, bye.
Bye, Felissa. Thank you very much. 6:30 in the morning now, 6:25 in the United States, in Florida. Now, next speaker here at Docday is Maren. Maren, you might know her from some of our last Docdays. Maren has actually been part of Team DDoC for a while, but is now working in Bern in Switzerland for DCB. And DCB has joined DDoC. DDoC has joined DCB in an effort to promote their Innovation Challenge. The Innovation Challenge is something Maren will now briefly introduce. She already did that at our Docday at ATTD, and the Innovation Challenge has been moving on. So Maren will present the 5 runner-ups to the bootcamp that are just about to maybe make it to the final award. Maren, take it away.
So thank you again. Thank you, Basti, for your kind introduction. As a Taiwan, I'm always so proud to be amongst all these great ambassadors from around the world who work so hard for us living with diabetes. And at the DCB, at the Global Center for Technology Innovation and Diabetes, we also want to do our part. And next slide, or the 0 slides. Yes, thank you, Hannah. So at the DCB, we are a private and independent, which is important, independent Swiss foundation founded in 2017. And our mission is really to identify the unmet needs in diabetes technology and help to translate them into solutions. And solutions we all need in our daily living with diabetes. And we are at the moment, we are so proud because we are such a growing, great international community and network that we want to join, where we want to join forces to achieve this common goal of making life with diabetes a little bit easier. So at the next slide, you have see briefly the team which is working so hard on supporting your ideas. So ideas from research, from the community, you really can come to us and tell us about your unmet needs, your ideas out there, and we are here to support you with services at the DCB, with facilities, but also, of course, with funding. And to find these great ideas, we see at the next slide, we have launched an innovation platform and an innovation challenge. This challenge will now run up every year, and we have started and launched this challenge this year with the topic of glucose measurement. So can your idea in glucose measurement change it forever? And we had so many great applications, over 70 applications this year, over 300 great people from around the world now at our platform. And we had then afterward the top 50 where we had worked on for the whole summertime, also with you, Basti and Hannah, as great mentors. So we had really a great time with them. It's the summertime. We had challenges, we had lunch lessons for them, and afterwards, now in the end, we had now to the top 20, and the top 20 had pitched to a jury panel for the lastly funding of $100,000 for the first winner and up to 100 for the second and third place. So we have now at the great honor to show you our fifth finalists. So if you at the next slide, you can see them. Next slide, please. Yes, here they are. So we are absolutely proud. You will see familiar faces also of the community, great patient entrepreneurs also within this cohort. So you see Nupur Lavani from India. She has built this Sugar Circle, so a unified diabetes platform. You see Edward Shao from the USA with Nimble, simplifying testing with a variable glucose and blood pressure sensor, so a combination of glucose and blood pressure. You see Yuri Matsumoto from Brazil with GlucoGear, so a closing approach to closing the loop for MDA. You see Kevin Röhl from Germany with Mila, your personal meal advisor. And we have last but not least, Nicolas Elvemo from Norway, who has built up GlucoSet, a minimal invasive real-time CGM for the ICU. So all of these great projects you find at our platform and also at our landing page, but also all other different 70 approaches you can find at our platform, where you see at the next slide where we also want to invite you, of course, too. So it's really like we have built a platform for you, for all these ideas, for all the innovators, but also for the community. So we want to work with you. We want to work with, to find with you, together with you, the unmet needs, the solutions we need for our daily living. And you can get inspired also at the 2nd of November, because we will then streaming also our live award ceremony where these 5 finalists will pitch their ideas. So you can find all infos about this at our landing page. And yeah, we are hoping that you are coming to our platform, that you're coming to the landing page, that you raise up your ideas, your unmet needs with us, because we want to change the living with diabetes with you and not without you. So thank you so much. And thank you, Basti, for the opportunity to tell you more about the DCB.
Thank you very much, Marlin. Thank you for not only running this innovation challenge, but for also asking DDoC to kind of work alongside with you. It's great to see some DDoC friends involved with this, and even now amongst the finalists, Nupur and her team from India have actually presented on numerous doc days in the past. So it's great that they have been pitching to you and made it to the top 5. That's really, really cool to see. Same as Kevin, of course, a close friend of ours as well. 2 great awards, the Leonard Lilly Award and the DCB Innovation Award, or the Innovation Challenge, that will also be represented again, the final finalists and winners at our Doc Day on World Diabetes Day. Follow DCB with the Innovation Challenge, and also you will be back next year, as you were just saying. Thank you, Maren. Now, we were going to have a really, really great speaker presenting now, Sana Ajmal from Pakistan. Sana, I think, also is a name that many of you know. She's been involved a lot with the Young Leaders Program with the International Diabetes Federation. She's a great advocate in Pakistan for diabetes advocacy, for women's rights in Pakistan. Unfortunately, she just messaged us on WhatsApp just about an hour and a bit ago that there seems to be a major storm, emergency, flood in Karachi. Sana was going to be in Karachi today all day, hosting a live event for youth, for youngsters, for children with diabetes. And she was going to quickly run away, turn up her laptop, join us here at Doc Day, and then go back to teaching her courses. Unfortunately, due to this flood, that event had been cancelled, and she is currently in the air again, trying to make it home as quickly as possible before the storm hits. So she will not be able to join us now. She's currently flying. Maybe we can get her in later if she touches down on time. If not, we will definitely try and bring her back for our Doc Day on World Diabetes Day on November 14. So join us there. Sana, I hope all is good with your loved one, with your family, and with all the children and youth that were attending or that were going to attend this day. And I hope Karachi is safe and sound today for everybody there. I already mentioned that one of the kind of large topics of this Doc Day is going to be stigma, type 2 diabetes, other forms of diabetes. And we'd like to kick it off and Renza Shibilia from Australia. Renza, welcome to Doc Day. You at Diabetes Australia ran a whole campaign on diabetes stigma earlier this year. Please tell us all about it and kick it off.
Bastian, hello and hi everybody. I'm so thrilled to be here, as I am always at Doc Day, and I'm really, really pleased to be speaking about this very, very important topic, and that is all about diabetes and stigma. So my day job is I work at Diabetes Australia, and in July every year it's our big National Diabetes Week, and this year the focus was on diabetes stigma. We wanted to highlight the sorts of issues that people with diabetes face every single day on top of the management and just living with diabetes things. We know that there are a lot of misconceptions out there in the wider community about what diabetes is all about, why we get diabetes, what it's like living with diabetes. And we really wanted to address that and go as far as we could to, I guess, bust some of those myths. We asked people in the community, what are the sorts of things that you hear, that you are dealing with every day, that you feel the need that you have to constantly go back and back and back addressing? And we came up with a huge list. It was quite remarkable, but there were definitely some themes there. And so what we did was that we ran our campaign around that. Part of our campaign materials was a couple of short videos, and we're going to play one of those videos now, and then I'll come back again and have a really another quick chat before we talk more about stigma with some other people.
Could you do that in the bathroom or something?
That looks amazing.
It looks like diabetes on a plate.
Should you be eating that?
You really should have taken better care of yourself.
So I think that many of the people with diabetes who are watching today would have experienced some or all of those comments being thrown at us unnecessarily. It does add an extra burden, a burden that we don't need. Stigma is not okay. The stigma from outside the community isn't great. The stigma from inside the community isn't great either. Diabetes is a really complex condition. It's a really serious condition. And I know that I'm already speaking to the converted here. I'm not telling you anything that you don't know. The aim of these videos was to get it out there in the broader community. We had incredible feedback. So thank you everybody who has already shared them. Please continue to share the video if you're able to. But I'm really glad, as I said, that we're highlighting stigma today. I know that we have a couple of other speakers who are talking about their experiences. And I think this is something really important that we do talk about. It is a big part of living with diabetes. It adds to the way people feel in themselves. We need to change those attitudes so that people treat us with respect, with dignity, and that diabetes stops being a punchline to every B-grade comedian's joke. We've heard it all before. There's nothing original about any of the diabetes jokes that we hear. So join me, I guess, as we're asking to put a stop to diabetes stigma. And Bastian, I'm really excited to hear what else we've got coming up on this topic now.
And so am I, so are we here at DDoC, Renza. First of all, thank you very much for running this campaign, and thank you very much for sharing it here. These videos, there's a number of them. In all their brevity, they are so spot on. When I first saw them, it really touched me personally. It's so brief, it's so to the point, and I watched it, and I didn't break out in tears, but I was touched. And I think that's the intention of it. And I think what makes them so great is that I'm pretty sure they also work outside of the community. I think if somebody sees that who has never thought about diabetes, who doesn't know anyone with diabetes necessarily, I think even they will get it. And if I am correctly informed, this is what your intention was, right? To get out of this bubble that you're always in.
Yeah, it was really interesting, actually. So you said that you didn't cry. I burst into tears. Even though I'd been involved in the development of them the first time, and I was there when we filmed them, the first time I saw them all together, it felt like a punch in the gut because I've heard it. And not only have I heard it, but I've heard other people tell me about how much they're affected when they hear this sort of thing. But the thing that was really interesting was that a number of people outside the community said, oh my gosh, does that really happen? And when we said, yes, it really, really happens, they stopped and some people said, actually, I've heard that and I've done that. I need to do better. And we're not trying to shame anyone. We don't want to be shamed. We're not trying to shame anyone. But we just want people to realise that what they are saying is harmful and it is hurtful. They wouldn't say this about most other health conditions. So we don't understand why diabetes is fair game for everybody to be so stigmatising. We're having this conversation, which is important. We've got to keep going, though. We've got to get better, and it's just got to stop. So thank you so much.
And Renza, you will see in the comments on our Facebook Live and also on Twitter right now that there's lots of support already, people shouting out saying, wow, this is so great. So please keep on sharing comments, questions, either in our Facebook Live video or on whatever kind of social media channels you use. But also please check out these videos on the websites of Diabetes Australia. Just peruse them, Renza. I guess that's okay. That's what they're there for, right? Use them, copy them, tweet them, share them. Because they will work not only in Australia, of course, they will work all around the world.
Yes, please do. Thank you so, so much, Bastian.
Thank you, Renza. Thank you for joining us for Docday. I know it's late in Australia, so thank you very, very much. So, as said, we will now have a couple of people from the DDoC Voices, from the community, talking about how they experience stigma in their own lived experience. And the first one is Ken. Ken Tite from the United Kingdom, from England. Ken, you live with type 2 diabetes. Tell us how you spell out stigma for yourself. Welcome to Docday.
Thanks for inviting me, Bastian and everybody else. And what a great videos these were from Australia. Well done, Australia. Yeah, I'm a type 2 person, and what does actually that mean to us? So let's look at the words, stigma. S, which stands for shamed. It's our fault. It's been lazy. We've had a bad lifestyle, or maybe our body or weight is the wrong shape. T, technology, is deemed not necessary for us by certain people. I is for insulin. It is used as a threat because we didn't manage our diabetes right. G is guilt. It's what we have been made to feel for having type 2 diabetes or other types of diabetes. M is the media. As somebody says, media on the social media where they didn't feel safe, as Phyllis said. And they perpetuate the myths of being lazy or having the easy or the good diabetes. These are not true. What I want to say is A, acceptance. We're not being accepted by the other type 1s as having the right diabetes. And you can see that, as I said, on social media. And another example is when somebody says, can you eat that cake? They say, I'm type 1, it's for the others, they can't. Othering is blaming others to deflect from you. However, you have just perpetuated the myth that people with type 2 diabetes or any type of diabetes can't eat cake. So let's accept. Let's accept working together. There are 422 million people with diabetes in the world. There are only 46 million people with type 1. Who has the bigger voice, the 422 or the 46? Working together, we have a louder voice. And as somebody said yesterday in one of the symposiums, diabetes has a soft voice. We need to be bolder. We need to shout out so that we can have the tech and support and to learn from each other so that we can all have a good quality of life. That is what we want. We want to be able to live life. As my endocrinologist in Edinburgh, even though I'm not there any longer, said to me years ago, after all, life is for living. And we want to be able to manage our diabetes, not the diabetes managing us. So by working together and being part of a bigger community, we will have a louder voice there for everybody to change the policy, to change life. So I think I'll finish at that because I could go on for hours. Thank you, Bastian.
Thank you, Ken. And I love how you define diabetes stigma from your own perspective by just putting words to the letters in that word. S for shame, T for the technology that's not necessarily considered to be for you, for someone with type 2. Insulin, you said, used as a threat, kind of, if you don't do well, then we'll have to put you on insulin. You talked about guilt, media, and acceptance for the letters of the word stigma. But I most of all like this calling out that you did, about working together and doing this together, because yes, indeed, I think the type 1 community has the much louder voice. We have a lot of very active diabetes advocates in the type 1 community, but in part we are, and I would even say that for myself, we are in part guilty ourselves of this divide in the communities, the type 1 versus type 2 kind of thing, where in fact we should all be working together and we should use the voice that we have in the type 1 community to also advocate for the more silent majority of people living with type 2, the silent majority, but also the minorities of living with other forms of diabetes that might not have a voice because there are so few in comparison. So both, I think, is very, very important. And we will have another couple of perspectives on that, on type 2, and also we had Felissa speak very similar in the very beginning about her misdiagnosis and how that affected her. And we'll have, for the first time ever on Docday, in a few minutes, someone speaking with MODI diabetes, a group that doesn't have a loud voice out there. So thank you very much, Ken, for kicking this off. And one of the things you were mentioning is insulin and how it's being perceived by some in the community of type 2s and by you as something that your HCP might be threatening you with, that it's kind of the end game. And I want to invite our next speaker, Michael Donoghue from the United States. He is also living with type 2, and he has a different perspective on insulin and the current year, the centennial of insulin. You know, it's 100 years that insulin was discovered. And there's something, Michael, that you find odd about this in relationship to you living with type 2, and I look forward to hearing your take on that. Michael, take it away.
Good morning, everybody from the United States. I live here in the state of New York. I live just across Lake Ontario from Toronto, which, as we all know, at the University of Toronto is where insulin was discovered by the Dr. Banting's team. One of the key things here is, I think my predecessors in this conversation, those who will follow me, really will demonstrate very well the position of inclusion. I think that's the key part, as well as how we're seen. And being involved in the process of also supporting and consulting with WHO, working with the IDF, other groups, it was very interesting. With the centennial, and as anticipated, it tended to be more focused, obviously, on type 1 diabetes, as well as insulin. And it is interesting because I am basal bolus on insulin. I just went on a CGM because of control reasons. But yet, individuals like myself who have already spoken, we still were a bit on the outside because of the stories that were told, the positions that were presented, and things like that. So thinking of this more like a fireside chat, I think the point that was most made is there's a lot more type 2s than there are type 1s and other forms of diabetes, but yet we should not have a position of competing, because competition is not the right thing. It's so important within this year where we have the platform to share with the opportunities of what insulin has provided, the advancements in the technologies and the medicines. We have to be able to work together to make that clear. As we move forward, I really believe there's a term that came up to me within this year as well. I'm not a patient. None of us are patients. We are people, and we live with diabetes. If people say, what type do I have? I tell them, I have type 2. I've had it for 25 years. I had a father who passed away from type 2 as well. The thing is, it's very close to my heart. It's not by a surprise. It's not by stigma. It's not by anything else. This is something I live with every day. And so do most people within, we each have to live with it on a very personal level, because diabetes is very personal, management is very personal, and things like that. So it is important to take these celebrations, no matter what they are, include them within the entire community, bring the voices up by the entire community. And I think it's just one of those things that we will become stronger together than, separate. So Bastian, I'm going to pass it back to you. It's, this is an exciting topic. Could go on for hours, but I know we have a lot of people behind me as well.
Thank you very much, Michael, and also to you. Thank you for getting up so early to join us here at Docday. And we have had a couple of conversations offline, and we will continue to do so, about the type 2 community during this year of 100 years of insulin, during the centennial, and how to make sure that you guys are also fully, or the community of type 2s are also, or feel fully included in these celebration, commemoration, advocacy efforts around it. So thank you very much for raising that. We are now heading to South Africa, and the next speaker here at Docday is Sally Hendricks from South Africa. Sally, you've been living with type 1, and you will be talking about something, and I think it's very important that we bring topics to Docday that are not necessarily always nice to talk about. You know, we have been doing a lot of type 1 advocacy in the past. We have now been talking a little bit about type 2, etc. We also need to talk about complications and of some of the stories behind what can happen without wanting to scare people. But you are a prime example of, you know, I already see it now that I have you here on my big monitor. You're laughing out there. Please just, I don't want to take it away. Share your story, Sally Hendricks from South Africa.
Hi, everybody. Thank you Bastian, for inviting me. And I feel honored to be part of this Docday. It's actually my first Docday. And I've been a diabetic. I've always used this term, a diabetic, never classifying myself as a type 1. So I am a type 1 diabetic for the last 39 years. And last year, October 2020, I had some complications because previously, for the last, you can say 4.5 years, I was actually walking with pain. And I couldn't walk for more than 20 meters without resting and then continuing my walk. And of course, last year, 2020, August, I had a bypass in my leg and that failed. I had the stents in September. The blood flow failed. Then, of course, the last option was amputation. And due to the pain that I had and everything, the morning after my amputation, I woke up with a relief, no pain. And it wasn't because I was actually drugged out of my mind or anything. I had a relief that there wasn't any pain. But the whole perception of complications and things with diabetes is I've accepted my diabetes from the beginning. Last year was the amputation. I accepted it. And to me, I moved on. With all the rehab, I was introduced to a beautiful company, you know, that treated me with my prosthesis and my prosthetic legs and thing. So, yes, the challenges for the complications is great, but acceptance and working around your strengths to have a wonderful support system from doctors to physiotherapists to prosthesis. And of course, it's all up to you to make the best out of everything. And during the last year, I became independent. I got my, how can I say, the controls for my car so that I can actually drive. My prosthetic leg was made. I became independent with my mobility. And how we actually live our lives as diabetics, for me, it is a powerful mindset and a positive approach. And living with diabetes is not easy. You have your ups and your downs, but with a positiveness or a beautiful approach and acceptance to everything that has actually come your way, you can live a beautiful life. And if we want to change, we have to change. So yes, with all the complications that I've got, I don't only have the amputation. I'm partially blind in my left eye because of my veins bursting behind my eyes. So these are all the complications that we actually get. Stigmas that is affiliated with everything. And as people have actually spoken about, stigmas are the blaming game. Even with your partners, I mean, they will always tell you, you lost your leg because you didn't look after yourself. And support in this diabetes world is actually something that is the greatest thing, your mental health. Because for me, with anxiety and depression knocking on my door, I have to be so careful on how I actually go into something where I can actually be there forever. But being resilient, I have to bounce out immediately. So with this journey this year, I've actually achieved a lot. I'm here today on Docday. I'm back at work. And so for me, I just kept on moving on and never giving up. Diabetes hasn't actually steered me away. I don't call myself a type 1. I'm a diabetic. And for the last 39 years, I'm a diabetic and now a diabetic amputee. Back to you, Sebastian.
Sally, thank you very much for taking the courage to speak so openly about your journey of the last 39 years, but specifically about this last year and a half, where the road has become very rough for you, and how you are now, as you're saying, you've moved on. You sound a bit like a diabetes Zen master to me, sitting there smiling, being very sincere and aware of what has happened, and not pinking it rosé and saying everything is great, but saying that, I'm resilient. You said I'm resilient. I've moved on. I'm back at work. I can drive again. I think it is very, very, very important for people out there to hear that. Of course, complications are part of not necessarily the reality for everyone living with diabetes, but they can happen. There is no preventing or making sure you never get it. There's always risks involved for that. Depends on a whole number of factors. But putting this into this framework of what we're talking about right now, stigmatization and how media, etc., also talk about it. You mentioned it yourself, even within your own family is so important. But for me, the most important thing is to see you here at Docday smiling, saying, I'm fine, I'm resilient, I'm moving on. It's a very, very important lifting up message for everybody out there who may be struggling with complications of any sorts. Thank you very, very much for sharing your story. Sally Hendricks from South Africa. And we'll stick to that topic, the topic of stigma and complications. And Sally, you also mentioned mental health and how that can affect you. It's also one of the many complications. And we're going back to the United Kingdom to Dan Newman. Dan, you are also living with complications. You want to talk about it. Usually it is you letting others talk, because you run this great podcast, The Talking Diabetic, where people living with diabetes, you interview them. Now I get to, well, not interview you, but give you the stage so we hear your story. Dan, take it away. Thank you for joining Docday.
Thank you, Bastian, and thank you to Steffi and Hane for inviting me as well. And the roles are reversed. I'll do my best, but my guests are usually much better at talking than I am. So I've been living with type 1 diabetes for 25 years, and I was diagnosed when I was 10 years old. And for me, the most difficult period was my teenage years going into my early 20s. And I am here talking at Docday today. As you mentioned, Bastian, I live with complications. So I live with diabetic retinopathy, and my treatment to this day has included multiple laser surgeries, and I've had vitrectomy surgery in my right eye. I also was in 2013, was diagnosed with chronic kidney disease, and in 2018, I received a kidney transplant. I was very fortunate to not have to need dialysis. But what I found in terms of the community is that complications, and we've touched on stigma, but it's still a topic that isn't spoken about much. And it almost feels like it's a bit of a dirty word. And when you are diagnosed with complications, my experience anyway, when it came to the retinopathy and the chronic kidney disease, was that I felt alone. I felt that I had failed the test. I don't know what test, but I just felt I had failed the test. And everything that I was told all those years ago had about, if you don't look after yourself, this will happen, all came flooding back to me in those moments of hearing that news. And that was really difficult. And then when you go out into the community, you don't really see many people talking about complications. So then you can feel even more alone. And at this point, before I go on, I should give a shout out to, I'm sure you know, Chris, the Grumpy Pumper, because he was I see tweets from him saying, with the hashtag, let's talk about complications. And that encouraged me to start to talk more about my complications, because I realized if I felt alone, there must be others who felt like me, or felt alone at the point of being diagnosed with complications. And actually, when we talk about a subject, we can take some of that stigma away from it and actually normalize talking about it. When I say normalize, I don't mean just, oh yeah, don't worry, don't just live your life how you want to, don't worry about complicate, but actually just take away that stigma and we can have a conversation. Because one thing that does happen, and I'm kind of living testament, as Salil is as well, is that, and many others are, is that when you do receive that diagnosis, in most cases, life goes on and you still have to adjust to life, living with your diabetes and living with complications. And we all know how relentless living with diabetes is. And as I mentioned, that when I felt like I'd failed the test, and this had a real impact on my mental health and mental well-being. And the biggest challenge for me was being able to, and maybe others have faced this as well, is learning to forgive yourself for past mistakes and actually not getting caught up in the cycle of, if only I did this, if only I did that. Because it took a long time to get to this point of realizing I can't change the past and I have to accept it. And I know that's again something that Ken touched on when he spoke about acceptance, and acceptance does come in different shapes and forms. And that was probably one of the difficult journeys for me, particularly living with I'd say the chronic kidney disease, was just that journey to acceptance. But what also helped is that during that time, I realized that other people needed kidney transplants, and it wasn't everyone who needed a transplant was had diabetes. And whilst it might sound a bit silly, that was a bit of an eye opener for me. It's like, oh, there are other people, and that helped with my journey to acceptance. And now when I look at the treatment that I have, instead of trying to look at it as I'm trying to save my sight, I look at it now as I'm trying to improve my sight. I'm improving where I am, and I've had to really work towards changing that mindset. And again, it does take time. And one thing that also I did want to touch on is just talking about the experiences of being a Black man living with type 1 diabetes and coming into the online community, and finding it difficult to find. It was difficult for me to find people who looked like me, who had stories or journeys that were similar to me, who understood some cultural nuances. And I think as we all know, representation matters. And I feel that voices of marginalized groups need to be heard more. And I know that there are many organizations and companies working to improve that, and that's improved over the past year. But for me, and perhaps a call to action, is that I do believe more needs to be done to be heard from marginalized groups, because as we all know, diabetes does not discriminate, and we need to hear from everyone. And touching on what's been said before, it's about us all working together as a community. So yeah.
Yeah. Dan, thank you very much for being so open about all of this, and also to the others, Ken, Michael, Felissa in the beginning. If you look at some of the feedback we're currently getting on social media, I know that's only getting a glimpse of it, but all your stories seem to really resonate. I think if Twitter and Instagram could transmit tears, you could see some people crying. Some are even writing that right now. I even hear from the back office here that Steffi might be joining. I'm just gonna read some of the comments we're getting, but there's a lot more. Catherine is writing about blame being a big barrier to getting good care. Marianne, who is living with complications herself, is saying how much these talks have just resonated. Min is talking about that she is crying and that she is sick of being resilient. So Dan, you said complications aren't being talked about enough, especially on the mental health side. That is even more so the case, and that we need to change that. And I just want to pledge here from the DDoC side that this is what we are trying to do. We are hosting Docday to get these kind of voices, your voice, Ken's voice, Michael's voice, and a lot more in the future out there. Because one way to do that is to include these voices where people like you and many others can talk about some of the not so nice things of living with diabetes, but also transform it into a call to unity, a call to action, a call for help, but also for support, for peer support. And this is what we're trying to do here. And I think the most important thing is what you also said, is that we need to get this message across that none of us is here by him or herself. We are not alone with this. Many of us struggle, me included, with complications and with mental health issues relating to that, to living with diabetes. And it is a very important part of life with diabetes. And in order to get this accepted, this was the A in Ken's definition of the word stigma, we need to talk about this. So thank you very much, all of you so far who've been so open to join Docday, talk about this. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Felissa, and all the others. And we will do this again and again and again. Thank you very much. Whew. We're going to change topics a little bit and go back to what I said in the beginning, talk about different forms of diabetes. I am very happy to now welcome Kylie Hansen-Kulwicki from the United States. Kylie, you live with Modi, and you are actually the first person ever. This is Docday number 15, and I don't think, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think we've ever had somebody living with Modi talk at Docday, so this is your spot. Tell us about Modi and your life with Modi. Welcome to Docday.
Thank you so much. What an honor to be the first person to speak about Modi. So hello, everybody. My name is Kylie. I have a form of diabetes called Modi. Modi is a genetic form of diabetes caused by a gene mutation. So this gene mutation causes the beta cells to function improperly and not produce enough insulin. This gene mutation is typically passed down through families, but random mutations can also happen. Some indications that someone may be Modi versus other types of diabetes are multiple successive generations of diabetes in a family. So for me, this has presented itself as my grandmother having diabetes, my father having diabetes, and then myself having diabetes. There's actually a 50% chance of a person with diabetes passing on their Modi gene mutation to each of their children. A person with Modi typically has no antibodies and has the onset of diabetes without DKA. There's typically not insulin resistance in the beginning, at least. There's usually a detectable C-peptide level because we can still make some of our own insulin. And then a person with Modi is usually diagnosed as an otherwise healthy adolescent or young adult who doesn't necessarily need insulin right away. So people with Modi can often be treated with oral or injected type 2 medications instead of insulin, but some people may eventually need insulin or may choose to go on insulin. Modi is diagnosed through genetic testing, and we know that there are up to 14 or 15 different Modi gene mutations, and there's even a chance that they could find more. And about 80% of people with MODY are misdiagnosed as either type 1 or type 2 diabetes. This is due to just a general lack of knowledge and awareness of MODY, as well as some difficulty getting insurance in the US to cover that and testing. And I've even had people tell me that their doctors just didn't want to bother testing them because they didn't think it would change anything. However, the correct diagnosis of MODY is really important for a few reasons. The first one is for treatment options. So like I said, a person with MODY could be treated with oral pills, and people with MODY are often respond very well to a medication called sulfonylurea, and that's usually the first medication that's given to someone when we find out that they have MODY. So having that correct diagnosis can lead to the best treatment for a person. The second reason that having a correct diagnosis of MODY is so important is for family planning. With a 50% chance of passing MODY on to your children, you kind of deserve to know that you have that chance so that you can make an informed decision about having children. And if you want to take that risk or go other routes, it's good to know that you could be passing on diabetes to your kids. And then the third reason is that some MODY gene mutations actually cause other health issues as well. In some forms of MODY, there are renal cysts, pancreatic insufficiency, magnesium wasting, and more. And it's important to know the risk of these, as well as know that they are caused by this gene mutation and connected to your MODY, and not just think there are all these random health complications happening to you. So MODY is rare, but it may not be quite as rare as we think. It may just be that people aren't aware that it exists. So I actually run an Instagram called My Life with MODY, where I do educational posts about MODY and just post about my life with diabetes in general. And I love to connect with people over there. So if you have MODY or think you have MODY or just have questions about it, please reach out to me there, and I hope to hear from some of you.
Kylie, thank you very much for educating us a little bit from a peer perspective, from someone living with MODY, on what that actually is, and especially on how to reach out to you. And maybe you'll be forming a small little MODY community out there, because you said, I think, that there's not so many people out there talking on social media about it, right?
No, not very many at all.
Well, so if you hear this, if you're at Docday, reach out to Kylie and see if you can get this peer support rolling and find each other, again, under this mantra of you're not alone, because you're always stronger together. Thank you very much. We're now heading back to Australia, and I look forward to seeing Georgie Peters. Georgie has been talking at a Docday in the past, but we thought we'd invite her back. Georgie will be talking about eating disorders, and we thought this was a very important topic back then, but specifically today, as we talk so much about stigma. It has so far been more about stigma and complications and stigma towards other types, but there's also a lot of stigma regarding eating disorders, not only from the outside, but also within the community. And I think that this is something that you want to talk about as well. Georgie, I look forward to your presentation or talk.
Thanks so much, Bastian. Can you hear me? We all good?
Yes.
Fabulous. Okay, hi, I'm Georgie. I am from Australia. I live around the corner from Renza. And I'm here today to talk to you about diabetes, eating disorders, and the obstacles to recovery. So essentially what we're talking about here, I'm talking about all eating disorders, all types of diabetes. Often when we talk about this subject, people will focus on type 1. They will focus on the media coined term diabulimia, which is withholding insulin in order to lose weight. And they often only focus on young white women. So it's really important that when we talk about this, we're talking about everyone in the community. Now, I guess the incidence of eating disorders in our community is really high. And again, I'm preaching that in converted. We know what it's like to live with diabetes, but there's such a focus on food and weight and numbers that often when we are suffering from disordered eating, when something's not quite right, when our relationship with food is suffering, we're often praised for that. And that extends when you're if you don't slide into the mold that people see as the perfect diabetic. So often stigma around weight. So if you are living in a larger body, if you don't fit the mold, often that stigma can add to the lack of diagnosis. People will praise you for doing things that would be picked up much earlier in someone that wasn't living in a larger body. So essentially, the obstacles to recovery when we're living with an eating disorder and diabetes, there's quite a few of them. So the first thing, as I've said, it's not seen as an eating disorder. Whether you're suffering from anorexia, from binge eating disorder, from bulimia, a lot of the behaviours that people are able to see manifest themselves as good diabetes management. So it's often not picked up early enough, not as early as it would be in people without diabetes, right? A lot of the time, if your A1C is perfect, your time in range is really good, people don't often delve deeper than that. And that's a real obstacle to, one, identifying an eating disorder, and secondly, getting help for it. Another obstacle that we face, again, as I've said, if you're not the ideal weight, that's often an obstacle in itself. The stigma that we have in the diabetes community around fatness and being fat and living in a larger body is really horrific. We can see that in the experiences of people that don't have type 1 diabetes, of type 1 people themselves, stigmatizing other people that live in a different sort of body. And so that stigma, if you're not the ideal weight, these eating disorders are often encouraged not only by the people around us, they may not, but by healthcare professionals as well, and they don't know. And that's what society is telling us, but that is an obstacle that we face as well. Another obstacle that we face in terms of eating disorder recovery is a lack of consistent screening. There are screening tools that are available if you live with diabetes and an eating disorder, but often healthcare professionals aren't aware of them, or if they are, we may not fit the criteria, or they may see it as a way of managing that seems super fantastic, when in reality it's really not great for our mental health at all. The biggest obstacle that not the biggest, but one of the biggest that I found in my lived experience, as well as working with other people with diabetes and eating disorders, is a lack of communication between healthcare professionals. So when you're trying to recover from an eating disorder, you have to discuss your recovery with your diabetes team, as well as your eating disorder team. And often that burden will fall on you, the person who's sick and the person who's struggling. And that's not fair. So one of those biggest obstacles that we face is trying to find a way in which our healthcare professionals can work together to help us without the burden falling on us or people who love us. Now, I think the biggest obstacle, again, in my lived experience, is the question of access as well. So the access question is sort of multifaceted. First of all, we have the cost, which is fairly straightforward. It depends where you live all over the world. The cost can be free, the cost can be prohibitive, and everything in between. The second barrier is that do they even exist? In most countries, they don't. In most countries, it's kind of you're trying to hobble some stuff together. You find a psychologist here, you find a diabetes team here, and you hope and you cross your fingers that it works and something happens. And I think the biggest obstacle in terms of access is sort of the structural barriers that exist as well. So it's already really hard for someone who has many other privileges to get help for an eating disorder. If you're white, if you're middle class, it's still really difficult. So if you bring in those other structural barriers, such as people from different marginalised communities, if you're a person of colour, if you're living with another disability, if you are living in a country where you don't speak that official language very well, it all becomes a lot harder. If you're a woman, sexism comes into it as well. So there are all these barriers that sort of come up against it when you're trying to seek help. So it is really important that we talk about living with diabetes and eating disorder. It's important that we raise awareness of it, but the most important thing that we do is to start working within our community to remove these barriers, because we can talk about it and we can talk about it and we can say how terrible it is, but until we start working within our community to break down these barriers and make sure that everyone has access and the ability and the, I guess, desire to pursue recovery, we're not going to get any further. So essentially, my key takeaway is, Bastian, we need to smash these obstacles in front of us in order to pursue eating disorder recovery within our diabetes community.
Thank you very much, Georgie, for smashing it and getting that message out. It's always great to have you talk about this. No. Wonderful. Thank you very much. And I just want to say one thing. I know you and Renza are in Melbourne. You are, as Renza yesterday told me, the city that I think in the world has been under lockdown for the longest. So I'm just sending you lots of positive energy towards Melbourne, hoping that you can open up soon. It's just something that crossed my mind spontaneously. Thank you for talking about stigma in eating disorders in the diabetes space. I think this is also a very important topic that we have to talk more about, and this is what we're here for. Thank you for joining us again at Docday. Now, this sounds a bit like, but you know, after all these talks that have been quite tough, also myself, I was quite moved, I must say, just a couple of minutes ago when we were having all these testimonials on stigma and complications, etc. So I'm very happy to move to a very positive face and story now, and I'm happy to see Mel here, Mel Stevenson-Gray from England. Mel, you are joining us. You're, of course, a very well-known face in the diabetes community, usually joining us as the athlete with diabetes, which you still are. But you're going to talk about something slightly different today, because I think the biggest change in your life is that you're no longer alone. So welcome to Docday.
Thank you so much, Bastian, and thank you for putting on a fantastic workshop. So it's my pleasure to speak to everyone today about kind of how my life has changed to become a mum with type 1 diabetes. So really, I just kind of want to give a bit of an insight, really, because it's something that is really not spoken about, or it's spoken about very quietly in circles. But I think it's something that needs more awareness raising, really, and certainly more research. So with regards to my own pregnancy, my diabetes team, perhaps quite unromantically, said that they were the first ones that needed to know if I was planning pregnancy, because I needed things like a higher dose of folic acid to protect the baby from defects, and also, sorry, you can hear her giggling in the background, and also to get my HbA1c into a place that would hopefully reduce the risk of complications later on. So I worked for about a year or so just to kind of try and get that kind of really tight HbA1c control or management. And then I was fortunate enough to become pregnant and let my diabetes team know. And it was incredibly, from day one, it was incredibly hard work. The best thing I've ever done, but also the hardest, because the parameters for my blood glucose levels going into meals needed to be really tight. Also, coming out of meals within an hour of eating the meal, my blood glucose levels needed to be in a really tight range. And what you can't prepare for when you live with type 1 and become pregnant is the level of insulin resistance, which really works against you to try and, you're trying to get your glucose levels down, and that insulin resistance is working, in the other direction. So I found as well that I needed to exercise quite frequently. So I had to adapt my exercise from training really frequently for sprinting to doing things like spinning after I'd had a meal, or going for a walk as well. And the other thing that was really important to focus on was my nutrition. That I was really lucky that in the UK we have a conference called the Type 1 in Tech Conference, and I'd really been championing to have experts speak on pregnancy and nutrition there, because of course with diabetes, carbohydrates have such a huge impact on our blood glucose levels that can't be ignored. So I worked to kind of, rather than becoming a low carber, I would say that I was having moderate amounts of carbohydrate spread throughout the day with a balanced diet as well, to try and maintain my HbA1c, my glucose levels, and the health of the baby. I did give birth early due to, I suppose, kind of slightly diabetes-related complications, but the baby came out really safely. She's a little wonder, and she's absolutely thriving. The other thing that I would mention that is quite challenging with diabetes and pregnancy is breastfeeding. as well. The only way I can describe it was that I had to approach it as if I was doing sport because of the sheer amount of energy that you use up in trying to produce the milk to feed the baby. So again, there was a spotlight on nutrition, and diabetes management still was incredibly important, but all of a sudden you've also got this little life to look after too. So I was really grateful for diabetes technology to help kind of manage the condition in the background as well, so I could give my focus and attention for her. And it has been a challenge, of course, getting back to physical activity after the birth. But I think one of the things that it was important for me to remember, and I kind of kept telling myself, was that there was no rush, that I could get back to sport when the time was right for my body, for the baby as well, because I wanted to enjoy my time with her, and I didn't want to have the pressure of having to go back to training 6 days a week, or for my body to look a certain way. It was just about health and recovery. So I was really glad that I had the opportunity this weekend just gone to run my first 10K race, just as a level of fitness really, and for my daughter to see me running and to be able to show her that you can achieve anything you put your mind to, really, regardless of whether you've got diabetes or not. So even though, as I say, it's been the hardest journey I've ever been on, it's also been the most rewarding, going through diabetes and pregnancy. If you've got any questions, if there's anything that you'd like to know about in more detail, I'm quite open in talking about this on my social media, which is Life Sport Diabetes.
Mel, thank you very much. Such a beautiful story. And the reason we wanted you here is to have, after this more dire and hard topics, have a beautiful smile and a beautiful story with a new life here at Docday, but also because you have learned so much, you have been investing so much energy also in making sure everything is going right. You come from a very competitive background in your sports career, and you're, as I saw on social media, going back that way. And you are so, as you said yourself, so open to talk about this. So anybody out there watching Docday thinking about becoming a mother and or becoming a father, or wanting to be supportive to a mother with diabetes, you can reach out to Mel and read up on her story and hopefully learn a lot and make sure that the baby and mom will be great just as you are. Mel, thank you very, very much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
We're now turning this around, and our next speaker is Jackie Namara Rukade from Uganda. She is having a baby with diabetes. Well, she had a baby with diabetes and started a platform called Sugar Cubes. And well, we know some of these platforms here in Europe or in the US. Children with Diabetes is the largest community of parents of children with diabetes. Jackie, you did something very similar out of very similar motivations in Uganda. You wanted to talk a little bit about that, but then also about the situation in Uganda right now after COVID, which I think is important to hear as well. Welcome to Docday, Jackie.
Thank you very much, Bastian, to the DDoc team. And thank you to all our diabetes advocates. I'm truly inspired by all the stories that I've had so far. And Renza, I am an ardent fan on Twitter. It's my pleasure to actually see you in the flesh. I like the way you share your stories, because I can so relate to some of the drama involved in managing diabetes. So like Bastian said, we began our diabetes journey about 13 years ago. Our son was diagnosed at 1.5 years old. And that came as a complete shock to us, because we didn't know any kids who had diabetes at that point. And so as we began to learn more about, what it takes to raise a child and to get familiar, it took us a couple of years. So in 2011, we started Sugar Cubes as a platform for parents and kids to find a space where they could come and share basically everything that they were going through, their fears, their frustrations, their joys. But we also use it as a platform to do diabetes education, to create awareness for diabetes in children, and to advocate where we are needed. So what are the things that we are currently faced with, especially with COVID? We all know that COVID came and disrupted and turned the world on its head, and the same thing happened for us here in Uganda. But what we are finding particularly challenging now is that because we have so many of the children who are attending diabetes clinics, which were supported either by the Like for a Child program or the Changing Diabetes in Children program, most of those have not had access. So if you asked me now how many children are at risk or how many children are accessing care and the necessary insulin and strips, I have no idea, because we've lost touch with some of them completely. Others obviously are struggling with economic impacts, and what that has forced us to do is to take a more holistic approach about the way we do education and advocacy. It's not enough for me to just tell you how to prevent and how to manage. We now need to even start thinking about how do we encourage the households and the communities around them to participate in some sort of income generating activity that will fund the various consumables and the insulin where free insulin is not available, because it's a hard choice when you have to choose for food from the family or to buy some insulin for your child who has diabetes, and the children with diabetes often lose out in favor of the wider considerations. And we found this conversation was particularly difficult because we even got to a point where, we had families which didn't have food, they didn't have cooking fuel, looking for transport to get strips and insulin out to those who needed it. When the travel restrictions and the lockdown were in place, we had families and kids who were separated from their primary caregivers, and there were really some heartrending calls where you're trying to mobilize a neighbor to figure out how to use a glucometer and administer insulin to a child who is experiencing a really either bad hypo or hyper situation. So it's forced us to make the conversations broader and to bring in a lot more people who typically wouldn't come to the table willingly. So we are reaching out to the insurance providers, for example, and also trying to have that conversation with government in terms of inclusion at the universal healthcare level. And then appreciating, obviously, that because they're children, what applied and what you needed last year changes from year to year, and so we can't have a standardized one size fits all approach. We have to keep customizing how we present our programs, how we engage with the kids and the families to suit where they are at that particular point in time. The previous speakers have spoken about stigma and discrimination, and this is for me something close to my heart, especially when the kids go to school, making sure that they are not left out of any school activities just because the administration is scared about what might happen, being left out of things like sports activities. And it's a continuous education program, so we can never tire of it. And of course, all important, that mental support, the social psycho support, because it's a very lonely disease. And so imagine a child who has not only to deal with this life-altering challenge they have, but to also have to cope with it mentally at a stage where everyone else that they look at is living this happy, carefree life. And so those have been some of the things that are keeping us awake at night. And then obviously for the caregivers, burnout is real. And it was lovely for us. A couple of weekends ago, we got together with a couple of mums and just had a coffee because we hadn't seen each other in so long. And just to have that time together and just support each other and encourage each other to work together is really important. So the message from us is really that we don't want to see any child dying of diabetes. That's our key mission, to make sure all these kids are growing up healthy and are productive and are leading lives that are as happy as they can be. And hopefully we are making the world know, and particularly the people in Uganda know that, there is a life with diabetes. It's not a death sentence. It's just another thing you live with, just like any other chronic illness. Thank you so much for providing us with this platform to share our story, and I look forward to working with you all. Thank you.
Jackie, thank you very, very much for sharing. And I want to say, when I first heard about you and your activity and Sugar Cubes as this NGO that you started over a decade ago, I was primarily just interested in, okay, what do you do? What's Sugar Cubes? And then in our pre-calls where we talked about Docday, what I really, really came to love about what you have now also been presenting is how the hardships of our times right now, the post-COVID, difficulties that have come to life in in your community, in your country, how this brings out the kind of best in peer support that this community can offer to people, that you, as you say, bring in people who usually wouldn't join the table, that you manage to kind of do what peer support can do for all of us, even for, as you said, the caregivers, mothers coming together, discussing, helping each other out just by talking. I think this is so important, how us sticking together in this kind of peer support spirit can really, really make a difference. And I know it's difficult times right now, but it is great to see at the same time how these difficult times bring this back to life more than maybe it has been happening before. And I think what you're doing there is really like a role model, reminding us as well of focusing back on the core of peer support. Thank you very, very much. And please reach out, everyone, if you want to know more about Sugar Cubes and Jackie and what they're doing. And Jackie, best of luck in everything that you're doing down there. Thank you, Jackie. Okay, this would have been a perfect time to bring in Sana again from Pakistan. As I said, she was going to talk about access and access issues as well, but she still cannot join us because of the storm and the flooding in Pakistan, in Karachi. She's probably still in the air, so we will try and bring her back to elaborate more on access to diabetes care, access to insulin in Pakistan specifically for our Docday on World Diabetes Day. So we now switch and go to Tobias Bøgel Damqvist here in Denmark. I'm not sure I mentioned this in the beginning, but we are with Team DDoc in Copenhagen in Denmark. This is where we are broadcasting Docday from, and I'm happy to have Tobias, a diabetes advocate from Denmark, here live at Docday now. I don't know how many kilometers away you are, but it can't be that many. Tobias, you're going to talk about a more technical issue about adverse event reporting, and you've done a study on that. Take it away.
Thank you, Bastian. Well, actually, I'm a bit away because today I'm in Oslo in Norway, so 557 kilometers away from you in a Norwegian studio. But thank you. And while it is a very technical subject, it's also a subject that touches upon everything we have discussed today. Because when your equipment fails, when things doesn't work, the standard operating procedure of the healthcare system is saying, yes, you must have done something wrong. And I always start thinking, well, I probably did something wrong since this is not working, since it's not happening. So that's a very important point. Also in technology, the guilt is upon us. It's our own fault. That's the default mode. But if you shift one slide, this is a bit a technical issue. But what we do in Type 1 is that we do user-driven research in order to promote access to technology, more sustainable healthcare, and not at least user-driven innovation. Jump one slide. Yes. When you live with Type 1 diabetes, you know it, everybody. Our lives literally depend on medical equipment and insulin working probably all year round, 24/7, 365. But what we have seen in Denmark is that there's actually almost an active discouragement of reporting issues and adverse events. And that affects patient safety, and that affects quality of life. And what we see is that it's extremely difficult to actually report these things. And even if you do, you will get feedback like, well, the case is discontinued because incorrect use cannot be ruled out. It's your own fault. Or nobody else has said anything, so it's probably just nothing. Forget it. But when we dive into the numbers, when we use Freedom of Information Acts, and second, we found out that over the last 4 years, only 84 users had reported errors in Denmark. And I mean, there's 30,000 people with Type 1. There's another 30,000 people with insulin-treated Type 2, Moody, Type 1.5, etc. And the numbers just doesn't add up. So if you shift slide. So in our research on user experience, we added a large set of questions on access to technology, quality issues, and reporting. We try to do these reports every year. And if you shift one slide, what we really wanted to do was to ask people if and how many times have you experienced quality issues with your current equipment, and did you report it? And if you shift one slide, the first thing that really surprised us is that we got quite a lot of feedback, almost 600 responses, but the persons who answered, they are some of the most resourceful respondents you can find. There was a very, very strong participation bias. And some of our critiques, they used the K words and said, yeah, these are the Karens of diabetes. I said, no, it's not. These are the most resourceful people, well-treated, they know what to do, and even they cannot get through. So that was the first really scary experience. But if you jump one more, the research confirmed some of our worst fears, namely that people with diabetes, they experience quality issues and adverse events with a disturbingly high frequency. And it's across all technology areas. It's the syringes that break, it's test strips that doesn't work, it's the sensors that fall out, causes skin irritants, allergies, it's the pens that won't inject, it's the infusion sets that gives you adverse reactions, it's insulin pump with physical errors, with software glitches. And what happens is 2 out of 3 of these very resourceful people, they start out by reporting them to the manufacturers. Hopefully you'll get replacements, sometimes you do, but they only do so a handful of times, and then they are kind of like pushed away. And then they are reported to the healthcare authorities, a few of them, and they do so only once or twice, because it takes 9 months to get a response, and you're just told it's your own fault. So what we're doing, if you shift one slide more further, to improve patient safety and quality of life, we are doing micro campaign. I mean, one error at a time. We are helping people get through these Byzantine systems and report the errors. And in addition, we lobby healthcare authorities and the industry associations with 4 user-based policy proposals. We want to have single-based reporting. I mean, I don't know if it's a side effect, if it's a quality issue, if it's an adverse event, or if it's a technical error. It's extremely difficult from a user perspective to find that out, but it's my responsibility as is now to report it. We want to change that. Then we want the manufacturers to give us access to information errors at a product level, making it easier for us to compare the products. And we want the authorities to speed up the feedback. It doesn't take 9 months to report or to handle a report. It has to be immediately. And then my phone, my computer, everything electronic can report errors automatically. Why can't my smart pen or my insulin pen or my insulin pump? I want to have an automated reporting that actually goes forward looking and say, is there an issue that we need to fix, rather than having everything looking backwards. So that's some of what we're doing in Denmark on the trying to improve quality of life by focusing on the equipment we need to stay alive. And if you jump one slide, you'll just see that's an example. We have postcards on all the hospitals and all the outpatient clinics for diabetes lying around, as well as social media presence. And if you jump one more slide, you'll just see some of the research we've been doing and sharing. It's all somewhere between low budget and no budget. It's purely driven by volunteers like myself and Tina and Linda, but we try to have an impact on healthcare authorities and manufacturers. Thank you.
Important topic, and you are seeing some interesting comments on the social media channels already about people who are wondering why they never reported non-functioning equipment, etc. But I wanted to bring you in here for a different reason as well, just to show that you and Tina, you're both part of our DDoC Voices group, that part of our DDoC Voices actually do proper research and advocacy work as well, user-driven, patient-driven research, which I think is as important as the awareness work we've been talking about when it comes to complications, etc., as the many other topics, peer support specifically. So this whole patient community, patient voice community really has a whole number of issues where it's involved in, and I think it's important to have that reflected at Docday as well, even though we had this strong focus this year, today, on complications, different forms of diabetes type 2 specifically. But there is a number of comments on social media right now. Tobias, check them out later. With that, I would like to thank you. I would like to thank all our amazing speakers today, and I would like to thank you, the audience, for watching, for tuning in to Docday, for giving this hour and a half to listen to our stories, listening to the lived experience of people living with diabetes. I think there is a lot to talk about. I think there is a lot to talk about after today. As a DDoc, as Bastian, I usually try and not comment too much while we're having these presentations. I think our DDoc voices, the ones that speak here, the diabetes advocates at Docday, speak for themselves. But I really want to invite you to stay in touch with us, stay in touch with them. And as I said, meet us tomorrow night at Docday, meet them tomorrow night at Docday if you want to follow up on anything. I'd also like to thank my wonderful team here in Copenhagen. That's Hannah and Steffi in the production room, and Louis and Morten and our team from Join, the agency, who have been making this all happen. Thank you very much. Docday is always quite an effort on the back end, but I'm happy it worked well, it seems, on the technical side. That's very important. I hope all of you who've been watching enjoyed Docday. If you did, please mark your calendars for our next event. I already mentioned Doc Night tomorrow, but we also have a couple of other ones coming up. In 2 weeks, there's our DDoc Symposium at ISPAD. ISPAD is another international diabetes conference, and we've kind of been promoted from holding just a Docday to a proper symposium at ISPAD. But we will live stream that here again on our channels, and you can already find a Facebook event on our Facebook page. So check that out. It will be similar but different. Then on World Diabetes Day, mentioned before, that's on November 14, the birthday of Frederick Banting, the one who discovered insulin. We will have a Docday that we are hosting together with the International Diabetes Federation here in Europe, and we'll be visiting several European capitals. We'll be visiting DDoc voices in these European capitals, and we will be talking quite a bit about the international topic for World Diabetes Day this year, access to diabetes care, with a number of great guests and speakers. Last not least, if you're out there watching, if you live with diabetes yourself, if you consider yourself a diabetes advocate and you are considering maybe joining us, if you would like to present at one of these Doc Days, if there's a topic you're really burning about, if there's a message that you think should be broadcast here, something that you want to raise awareness for, please drop us an email, get in touch through any of the channels you're currently seeing on the slides. Just say hello. We would love to hear from you. Docday, as I said in the beginning, is a platform. It's a platform for the patient voice, which means it's a platform for you. Join us reaching out. You will soon find a recording of this Docday on YouTube and our other channels. We hope you will follow us on our social media channels, and I look forward to seeing some of you tomorrow night at Doc Night. It'll be fun. Thank you. This was Docday. Goodbye.